there's no early celebrating here. We don't celebrate early here on this show, okay? So the bet is still on. We shall see. I still believe that they will refrain from bringing federal criminal charges against Hunter that could result in imprisonment. I need to be very specific here, very specific.
You're starting to sound like Bill Clinton when he was getting questioned about Monica Lewinsky.
I need to get very deep. This is like, what is
Depends
a recession?
On what the meaning of the word is.
What is a recession exactly again? I'm not sure. What we're in, by the way, that's what a recession is. But Biden was asked about this by CNN's Jake Tapper last night. Here you go.
CNN's reporting and the Washington Post reporting suggests that prosecutors think they have enough to charge your son Hunter for tax crimes and a false statement about a gun purchase. Personally and politically, how do you react to that?
Okay. Can we just, Clay, before we get into it, he asked the question. I want you to react to Biden's response here and tell me what you think this means for where this is going.
Well, first of all, I'm proud of my son. This is a kid who got, not a kid, he's a grown man. He got hooked on, like many families have had happen, hooked on drugs. He's overcome that. He's established a new life. He is, I'm confident that he is, what he says and does are consistent with what happens. For example, he wrote a book about his problems and was straightforward about it. I'm proud of him. He came along and said, by the way, this thing about a gun, I didn't know anything about it, but turns out that when he made my application to purchase a gun, what happened was I guess you get asked the question, are you on drugs, you use drugs? He said no. And he wrote about saying no in his book. So I have great confidence in my son. I love him, and he's on a straight and narrow, and he has been for a couple of years now, and I'm just so proud of him.
What do you make of that answer?
So, first, I understand that this is a highly planned answer, and I almost feel like Jake Tapper told the Biden White House, hey, I'm going to have to ask about Hunter, just a heads up. Don't know that happened. Jake Tapper may claim that he never does anything like that. But what Joe Biden is trying to do there is distract from what his son did by blaming the fact that he was a drug addict, but simultaneously basically daring Jake Tapper to push back aggressively. Now, Joe Biden here, essentially admitted that his son did lie on the drug application, on the gun application about use of drugs, and even wrote that he had lied about it. I haven't obviously read Hunter Biden's book because I literally can't think of anything I would least rather do almost.
I mean, there might be some interesting passages, to be fair. You know, it's a little bit like the memoir of Pablo Escobar in the early days.
But he admits to the felony there through his son. But Jake Tapper asked the question, Buck. What I am disappointed about is the follow-up to, okay, your son was so drug-addled, why in the world was he still able to make millions of dollars from foreign companies, right? Like, that seems like a natural follow-up. If your son was so incapacitated by his use of narcotics, how is it that he was still able to negotiate multi-million-dollar deals with representatives of foreign governments and be paid for that? Those are good questions because, look, I don't begrudge. I mean, look, the videos that are out there, it seems quite clear that Hunter Biden had a major drug problem. I don't think there's any way to disguise that. But the fact that you have a drug problem doesn't mean that you can't also be, in some facets of your life, functional. And the way that this should have been followed up was you claim that you knew nothing about your son's business dealings. There are emails on this laptop that now would suggest that you knew quite a lot. Do you still stand by the fact that you knew nothing about them? And on top of that, I think he should have had to ask Joe Biden, hey, 51 top national security analysts out there said this laptop was a product of Russian disinformation. Given that it has now been reported by your allies at CNN and the Washington Post that there is enough evidence there to charge your son with multiple felonies, shouldn't your national security advisor, for example, have to apologize to the American public for saying this was a laptop of Russian disinformation now that at a minimum we know it's valid? Or would he still argue that there's some sort of Russian disinformation involved here?
People often ask me, because of my 5 years or so in the CIA, they'll say, what is the deep state? What does that actually mean? And sometimes I'll bring up, I think it's called the Derin Devlet, which is the Turkish deep state, which is probably the best known one, where there's a union of military and industrial interests in Turkey that will just sort of come along and say, yeah, no, that election, we're going to redo this whole thing, effectively a bloodless coup. So people talk about a Turkish deep state. In this country, the deep state is the national security Democrat apparatus, Raytheon, and other contractors, big defense contractor alliance. And what you see is they lied about the Russian disinformation laptop. We also got information today, or in the last 24 hours, and it's reporting, I believe, from John Solomon over at Just the News, that $1 million was offered to Christopher Steele to corroborate the dossier, which is relevant insofar as the same people who are now telling us, Clay, you can't prove that Hunter was selling access. There's no proof Hunter was selling access. Were the people who said that it was Russian disinformation on the laptop? Were the people who said that Christopher Steele and the dossier were ironclad? Oh, and then they actually it wasn't even necessary. They kept changing how important the dossier was to the Russian, collusion investigation. These people are just propagandists, and they use the cloak of national security legitimacy to forward their propaganda in service of Democrat, in this case, Biden family interests. So they're all liars, and nobody should listen to them is the bottom line.
Yeah, and also this explains a lot of the Trump conversations with James Comey, right? Like, Trump knew that all this Russia collusion mess was a lie. James Comey should have known that nothing in the Steele dossier could be confirmed, and therefore he could have come out and said the FBI's been unable to corroborate any of these allegations. Instead, we spent years dealing with the Russia collusion lie as if they had handed the election to Donald Trump. And to me, this is all kind of tied together, Buck. And on Jake Tapper's interview, I feel like a lot of times these journalists go in with a list of questions that they want to ask, and they don't follow up on the most important aspects of the questions. In other words, they've got their checklist, and Jake Tapper can check, asked about Hunter Biden on his list, but he allowed that rambling answer from Joe Biden, which really wasn't an answer, and didn't follow up with any of the details.
Also, the opening to how does this personally affect you? I don't need to hear about, nor do I care about how Joe Biden loves his son. That's nice. Everyone should love their son.
Yes.
That's irrelevant to whether there was corruption involved here in the selling of office. And that frankly, wasn't touched on.
And frankly, the drug use isn't that relevant, right? In terms of how it impacts Joe Biden.
The drug use is really a smokescreen and a sympathy play, right?
That's
They're
right.
saying, notice how he said, like so many people across the country,
Yes.
my son got hooked on drugs. So first of all, okay, his son's a brat. All right, it's not like he's some kid from a town with no with no future, no parents, and got hooked on oxy that was handed to him when he was 17 years old or something. I mean, Joe Biden had a son running around making money off the Biden name for a long time, and this notion that we care about his drug use, so we're being mean people. I don't care about his drug use.
Yes.
I mean, sometimes when he's doing the naked water slides, it's a little amusing when the photos come out in the Daily Mail. But what we care about is Joe Biden is a liar, that people who have been CIA and NSA directors, people I even worked for, are also liars in defense of Joe Biden and his son with the laptop, that there was selling of influence to the two. What are the two most important foreign policy challenges of the day right now, Clay? Russia, Ukraine.
Yep.
Hunter was selling influence to Ukrainian and Russian-backed, perhaps, Ukrainian businessmen. And China, where Hunter was also getting money. So it's not like Hunter was getting money from Thailand
Costa
and
Rica
Guatemala. Costa
right.
Rica. He was getting money from two major national security challenges. In the case of China, an opponent.
And again, the charges that he's being accused of potentially are IRS tax evasion, not relating to drugs, and also the only aspect of the drugs is lying on the gun application. So they are using the drugs as a smokescreen when the reality is selling influence is the story here and the questions that should be asked. And to be fair, the New York Post, when they broke this story, mostly ignored the salacious hookers, the drug use, all of the personal failings that Hunter Biden demonstrated on that laptop and in those videos and in those photos, and instead focused on the things that are germane to Joe Biden's political future, and that is his son selling access to his dad for millions of dollars. I mean, really, the Trump impeachment over the Ukraine phone call, increasingly, as Trump said at the time, the phone call was fine, and what Trump was trying to do, perhaps a bit ham-handedly, was just draw attention to the actions that Hunter Biden had undertaken that the laptop clearly demonstrated he had. And Trump was actually correct in the questions that he was asking about Hunter Biden's behavior. Joe Biden actually said, in addition to the fact that I think Hunter Biden's going to get charged with crimes right after Election Day, and Buck is going to owe me a steak there, I also think that we're going to see a red wave, and Joe Biden is not going to be running for re-election. He was asked about this in an interview with Jake Tapper of CNN. Here's what he said, asked specifically about if he will be running in 2024.
Big question, of course, is when you're going to make an official announcement about whether or not you're going to run for 2024 for re-election. Do you think you'll make a decision before the end of the year?
Well, look, I'm not going to make this about my decision. I'm going to make this about this off-year election. After that's done in November, then I'm going to be in the process of deciding.
Is one of the calculations that you think you're the only one who can beat Donald Trump?
I believe I can beat Donald Trump again.
Are you nervous?
No, because, look, I believe that Biden does believe that he is the only one who could beat Donald Trump again. That's not to say I think he could. I think he thinks he can. And, right now it seems crazy, and I understand that, but we're going to go into recession now. You know what's going to happen? Republicans are going to be able to thwart the most destructive economic impulses of Democrats for the second half of Biden's first term. The economy will start to recover. Things will start to feel more normal because there'll be no Biden agenda getting through, assuming we take the Senate as well as the House. And he's going to run on, hey, it took a little longer. It took a little more. But look at the normalcy. Look at the recovery. And that sounds crazy right now. But I think if people, look into the future a little bit, I think that's a very realistic possibility that Joe Biden's holding on to as to why he would still run again.
I think Trump is the only reason Joe Biden would run again. And I think that Trump is Joe Biden's life vest. Because if Trump didn't run, let's just say Trump came out and he said, you know what? I've seen how Joe Biden performed based on his age. I think there are a lot of younger people out there. And so I'm going to let the Republican primary play out, and I will endorse whoever wins and put my full weight and authority behind him. I don't think he'll do it, but if he did, I think it would spell the end of Biden.